Back in the 1980s, Miami was the murder capital of the nation. There were more than 600 murders here one year, and this place was so bad they ran out of room to stick all the bodies. Today, Miami is not like that. Most of its former crime hotspots are far less dangerous, but it's still very poor here. The dangerous areas of Miami have earned their reputation, and there are pockets out here that are really scary, but it's still far better now than it once was. On today's Florida tour stop, I'm going to look at 5 of the worst places in the Miami area these days: Opa Locka, Liberty City, Overtown, Little Haiti, and Hialeah. And as we'll see, there's a pretty good chance these neighborhoods won't even exist in their current state one day. Miami's growing fast. There's a lot of developers putting pressure on these poverty-stricken places. And even though these areas do have a lot of crime and a lot of people here live in poverty, you'd get a lot more love and hospitality in these neighborhoods than anywhere else in Miami. That's for damn sure. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'd know this is day 15 of a big Florida adventure. I began up in the Panhandle. Then I worked my way into Central Florida, wound around the Gulf Coast, went across Florida, and now this is the final day in Miami. If you looked up what areas of Miami have the worst of it when it comes to robberies, shootings, assaults, and murders, most of the worst areas are located here, north and west of downtown. A majority of these places are Hispanic, some are African American. As a whole, 3 in 4 residents of Miami are Hispanic, and 15% of the city's black. Now, these places we'll visit have calmed down since their peaks in the 70s and 80s. Some parts of town are worse than others. Miami is below average nationwide when it comes to crime these days. And a big reason for the lower crime is because of changes in this very part of Miami that we're going to see right now. Now that we've established a lot of background, let's get into it. We're going to begin in Opa Locka. Opa Locka is actually a small city located here, about 15 minutes from downtown Miami. There are 17,000 residents in Opa Locka, and the population here is starting to go down. Half of the community here lives in poverty, and many are on welfare. 20% of the population doesn't work, and likely hasn't for a while now. In the 1950s, this was a nice place to live, a part of town where kids could play outside. But things here really changed in the 70s. A lot of the middle class was replaced by the lower class. By the time the 80s arrived, Opa Locka became the cocaine capital of Miami, and that's saying a lot, because this place was bursting at the seams with coke back then. So to be the center of the cocaine industry in 1981 was really quite an accomplishment. By the time 1987 arrived, things were so bad the city of Miami had to put up metal barriers on the intersections leading into this hood, and that totally walled off parts of this city from the rest of Miami. The goal was to keep the drug traffickers out and prevent the criminals from fleeing. God, can you imagine living trapped in a neighborhood where criminals were walled in? Today, Opa Locka is often called the crack capital of Miami. Right now, we're in what locals call the Triangle, an area known throughout the city for high violence and drug use, the kind of place where people choose drugs over jobs. Opa Locka today ranks as the 10th most dangerous city in America, where residents have a 1 in 50 chance of being killed, raped, or beaten up. You also have a 1 in 19 chance of being robbed here every year. That sucks. Search Opa Locka on YouTube, and it's basically footage of crimes, bad rapper videos, and ghetto driving documentaries just like this. Some people call it a ghetto amusement park, and that is just mean, you people. A lot of people who live in this part of town seem to like it far more than the people who have to drive through it. Opa Locka is 60% black and 40% Hispanic. The Hispanic numbers are increasing yearly here, just as they are in other parts of the northern edges of Miami. There used to be a lot of Haitians, but many Cuban families are making their way in. But today, things aren't so bad, though. Wealthy people are moving into some of the fringes of the city. They've removed a lot of the barriers, and they've put up public art and fixed up hundreds of the rundown buildings. Amazon even stuck in a big distribution warehouse in town, so that's good, I guess. Perhaps the most threatening area I saw in the Miami area was Liberty City. This is a neighborhood, not an actual city. It's about 5 miles from downtown proper. There's about 22,000 people packed into this neighborhood where most folks earn about $10,000 a year, and again, most are on welfare. It's 95% black in Liberty City. The rent continues to go up in all the communities we're going to talk about. These homes are just too valuable. A lot of landlords are kicking tenants out and then flipping the houses and charging far wealthier newcomers up to $3,000 a month to live here. I know, $3,000 a month for rent in places like this. This is happening all over Miami. It's just ripe for development. A lot of the wealthy people are afraid to buy a home near the water these days, and so they're moving inland into hoods just like this. Homes today are valued at about $350,000, and that's a steal, right? What's also helping is the city's tearing down a lot of the old housing projects and replacing them with low-income new housing. And then they're screening the new tenants. Supposedly, if you have a criminal record, you're not allowed to move into the new low-income developments being built here. Liberty City actually began as a housing project during the Great Depression in the 1930s. This was actually home to the first ever housing project in the southern U.S. Back then, it was considered a nice area for middle-class black families. This is the Pork and Beans housing project. It's well known throughout Miami as being one of the most dangerous places in all of Miami-Dade County. A lot of poor black families moved into Liberty City in the 60s and crime shot up. Soon, the middle-class black families left the area, and it went into major decline beginning in the 1970s. There were a bunch of race riots here too, which made the place even worse. Today in Liberty City, kids die to gun violence on these streets. Gangs are in the area. Many people here say they don't know if they're going to live or die here. There's bars on most windows. I mean, they named a video game after this place. That's how bad it is here. One person I talked to called Liberty City the pit of hell in Miami. Another said hopelessness pervades this community. That's mean. But the people who live here say they have to do what they have to do to survive. There have been a few highlights here. A lot of famous rappers and NFL players grew up in Liberty City, and they were able to make a good life for themselves and move on. Although, many of the rappers who came out of this place glorify the violence. Liberty City is less dangerous than it was 30 years ago, but it's still really bad. Violent crime is 4 times higher than the national average. 1 out of every 13 people who live in the Liberty City neighborhood is a victim of crime every single year. There's a police shortage here. There's a teacher shortage here. It is rough here, but it's not Oakland or anything. That place is a straight up dump. I'm never going to get over how wrecked Oakland is. Now we're in Little Haiti. It's a neighborhood of 30,000 people just east of Liberty City. Most of Little Haiti is home to Haitian immigrants, as well as residents from the rest of the Caribbean. As you might expect, many of the people who settle here come from very poor and troubled Caribbean nations, so they're going to be broke. Half the people in Little Haiti live in poverty. Now, the Latin culture in Miami has strong family values and traditional ways of thinking. It's frowned upon to move away from your family, so a lot of people here don't ever leave if they can help it. It's both endearing and limiting. Crime is bad here, but it's not nearly as bad as the areas we've already visited. Just like other parts of Miami, a lot of the housing projects just like this are either being torn down or will be torn down at some point. A lot of the people that flee here are going to go to rural parts of Miami-Dade County, into places like Homestead and Florida City. Little Haiti has a lot of valuable real estate. I mean, it butts up against the city's new modern design district and the booming new hipster neighborhood called Wynwood. Here's what Wynwood looks like now. You can see a lot of its abandoned warehouses that are quickly being converted into cafes and restaurants and condos, because all the hipsters have to have places to go to, right? And that brings us to Overtown. Overtown's being gentrified the most. That's because it's the closest to downtown Miami. I mean, this neighborhood touches downtown. This was once called the Harlem of the South, but not anymore though. At least not when it comes to the violence that plagued this place back in the day. Oh, I mean, you'll still hear about lots of crime and see people drinking booze on the sidewalks at 10 in the morning. There's still lots of people here looking to do illegal things. It's the kind of place where chickens run around in the streets, though there's nothing wrong with that. There's 12,000 people in Overtown. 3 in 4 residents here are black. Back in the late 1800s, this place was actually called Colored Town. Overtown was actually designated as a quote-unquote colored neighborhood. It was a pretty decent place in the 40s and 50s, and black entertainers like Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, and Nat King Cole performed here. But then the city put I-95 in, and that fragmented the community, and the population in this part of town plummeted. Crime kept in, and businesses shut down. By the 1970s, Overtown was referred to as a ghetto. But you can see how they're trying to fix the place up. Overtown's getting new community gardens and new remodeled storefronts. Grants have been secured to redevelop dilapidated low-income housing complexes. They were even thinking about putting Miami's proposed fancy new soccer stadium in Overtown, but they moved it to a nearby location. And all these new low-income units that I'm talking about that are going to be built here, they're only going to be able to help a few families. The lucky ones who get in can expect to pay as low as $500 a month to live in them. And finally, we come to Hialeah. Like Opa Locka, this is actually a city, sorta, within the Miami sprawl. It's actually a massive city. There's more than 200,000 people here. You may not know it, but Hialeah is the 6th largest city in the state, everyone. Here's some trivia answers for you. Hialeah is the largest Hispanic city in the country, and it's also the least diverse place in the country. 95% of this community is Hispanic. Many are Cuban, making it the biggest concentration of Cubans in North America outside of Puerto Rico. Hialeah was the main destination for all the Cuban refugees who fled Fidel Castro's revolution in 1959. If you live here and you don't speak Spanish, you probably won't have many friends. This place is way better off than the places we looked at already, but it was worth a quick look. Crime here is higher than average, but not nearly as bad as the rest of the areas. And of all the places we've looked at, this is by far the least poor. Still, the poverty rate here is close to 1 in 4, and that's 3 times higher than the national average. But this would not be the last time I would see large pockets of poverty in Florida. I thought I had seen it all. Every level of poverty and for every reason, of all races. But what I would see the following day in Palm Beach County is something I can never forget. It didn't look like anywhere in the United States I've ever seen. If there was ever a gap between the rich and poor in America, Palm Beach County has to be the most extreme version of it. What was it like to grow up in that part? I know things have changed now, and we can talk about that. But going back 20 years ago, what was it like growing up in that part of Miami?
It was definitely more shiesty. There still is drug use, but there was a lot more drug use back then. And, there was, of course, there's suburbs and there's, areas where there's nice housing and stuff. But I would just say overall, it was just kind of a little bit more violent, but still nothing compared to what we see in other cities and, things I've seen in your other videos from other states. So, it's was never anything like too crazy that I've witnessed, like, with my own eyes, but, you're always around it, the drug dealing, prostitution, the crackheads, right there at the corner store, especially in the Opa Locka area. Absolutely. It's like I have my grandma lives right there on one of the main roads there, and there's a corner store like 2 houses down. So, I would go to the corner store all the time as a kid and get my chips, get like fresh subs, hamburgers made. They threw it down. But, my dad was always telling me, like, don't go around there, don't go there. And I'm thinking, like, back then, as a kid, 7, 8, 10 years old, 12 years old, I'm like, oh, he's just, trying to be, Mr. Dad. But then I come back and look at it like, wow, there could have been so many occasions where anything could have happened to me. And maybe people just spared me because I was a little kid. I don't know. But yeah, it's, in this, I would say the change from then to now is that you can pretty much walk around in those areas I would say in daytime and be completely fine. I mean, with the camera and all, you might have some drunk guy come up to you and ask you some questions or whatever while you got the camera out, but I don't think you would have any issue as far as in the Opa Locka area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Drugs were a big deal, and I think you were probably born after most of the big drug problems that happened in the 80s. I think you were probably you were not around at that point, but it seemed like it was mostly cocaine deals and gun shootouts. And at one point they had barricaded some of those neighborhoods and some of those cities off from parts of Miami to just keep everybody separated. Did you have any relatives or anybody that like talk about how the old days used to be back then?
Yeah, so I actually have a few big cousins that would like kind of tell me stories about back then. Like typical, like, nothing serious, but like little like street gang stuff when you're in high school and college, like from their perspective. And I'm just like a little 6, 7 year old kid, and they're telling me. I knew they used to be on drugs and stuff too. I was probably like 7 or 8 where I would, kind of peep game, and I saw some, one of my cousins had the sniffles, and like, okay, now I think I know what's going on. So, but yeah, like the stories they would tell me was just a lot about like going to the club, getting drunk, whether it's South Beach or a local club in the greater Miami area, and getting to a fight with people from another area, and then this big thing, like those type of stories. A lot of fights. I'm not gonna sit here and say like shootings per se, but of course that happens as well. But backtracking to what you said, it's nothing like the 80s and 90s. I would imagine. I'm a late '97 baby, so I can only imagine how it was in the early '90s, and of course in the '80s when crack hit everywhere. And it still definitely is bad, and people on the corners and stuff. But it's just crazy. You cross the bridge, literally cross under I-95, and you're just right there by the arena and where the Miami Heat play. It's mind-boggling when people say like, oh, cross that bridge and this and that about Florida. It really is the truth. It really is the truth, because I know a lot of people that have came, like as far as friends from out of state that come to visit, but they stay in South Beach. The most that they go to Miami is Brickell, downtown Miami. But that if you go anywhere west of that, northwest of that, north of that, you're not in the best shape. And as far as going around comfortably, like it's party land, it's really not that.
Mm-hmm. Why are things improving there in that part of the city? I'm gonna guess gentrification. I'm gonna guess just more police, possibly the fact that their people are it's not as dangerous anywhere in the country as it used to be. Crime's down from the 90s in general. You don't have as many gangs around and stuff. Are those reasons why that North and Northwest Miami it's not as bad as it used to be?
I believe so. I mean, you still definitely got like your little street gangs and street cliques and stuff, but they kind of fight amongst each other. I mean, obviously. And if you stay out of that area, you're not, and you're not going to end up in a situation where, God forbid, you get a stray bullet or just witness things that you don't want to witness. So a lot of people, even me, when I'm around there, I just drive by. There's no reason to stop and get gas there. No reason to stop and get cigarettes. If you smoke your cigarettes, no reason to stop in the Publix around those areas. But yeah, as far as West Miami-Dade, which is the Hialeah area, and more of suburb cities with a lot of Latino pocket populations, it is very much progressed. The only downfall I would say for someone like yourself would just be the language barrier, because it's like I think 95 or 96. I don't know. It's like top 5 or top 10 in the whole nation as far as first language speaking being Spanish for the whole population there in Hialeah. So it's just like that would probably be your issue. But then you got young people like me that of course we go to school here and we know English and we know how to get around. So it's kind of like a mix of that.
But yeah, I had heard that the demographics have changed in that part of Miami. It used to be heavily African American, and now there's a lot more Hispanics that are moving into that part of Miami.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why is the Black population more dangerous than the Hispanic population? I've never understood that.
I don't know. That's a very, very, very good question. I don't want to kind of sound like cliche and sound like, people like what older people have told me, but as far as education, I'm sure that does play a role based on what neighborhood, what city you grow up in, what schools you go to. Heck, you can, live in a nice suburb town like Miami Lakes, a little bit north of Hialeah, but maybe you go to school in Miami Gardens and, it's not the best school. Let's just say as an example. So it's just really about who you're growing up around and what areas you're in predominantly that kind of lead to that. But overall, In Northwest Miami, I would say everything is kind of it's really died down. It's really died down. Like it's much safer. Coming back to it again, the most you would really have to worry about is kind of getting panhandled there at the car, the red light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear there's wealthier people moving into what's always been considered the ghetto and the hoods in Miami. I know we talked about gentrification, and they're bringing in jobs. I think you mentioned there's an Amazon warehouse going in. That's going to bring in
Yeah,
some jobs.
yeah,
So I mean,
yeah. So there's been an Amazon warehouse in the Opa Locka area, a big facility. I don't know how big it is, like on the Amazon stats thing, but I remember when they were building it 5-6 years ago, and I'm like, wow, this is huge. I didn't even know it was going to be Amazon back then, and it's brought a bunch of jobs. As far as I guess for young kids in that sense, because I'm not sure how the pay is going with those type of labor, but regardless, it's brought a lot of jobs to the community, both from Broward people and from people from Miami-Dade, and they were able to kind of grow from that. I also noticed a little bit more west of Opa Locka, kind of getting into the suburb area. There's like a UPS facility that's actually being built up right now as we speak. Same size, same big Amazon factory type of thing. So, of course, I'm assuming that's going to bring jobs, and that's what I like. It's like there's, as far as the gentrification, of course, there's pros and cons to it. But when you see, things like that bringing jobs to people, it kind of makes you feel like, okay, maybe the community is kind of getting some type of sense of, I don't want to say equality, but at the same time, yeah, it's like kind of everyone getting to this balance, where we all understand each other a little bit better.
yeah. How does one get out of the hood? You've probably seen friends that got wrapped up into trouble, ran with the wrong crowd, and went in the wrong direction. And you've probably had friends and family members maybe that kind of made better decisions and kind of got out of that kind of lifestyle. In your opinion, what's the best way to get out of the hood and leave that lifestyle, the drugs, the gangs, the guns, the criminal BS, and just become a model citizen, or at least a regular person?
I would say your crowd is the biggest thing. So even if it's someone you hang out with like once a week, but they don't maybe they don't bring the best influence to you, in all aspects. I think keeping away from those type of people is the biggest thing, because there's people that can, that live in Pembroke Pines, in a nice suburb neighborhood, but they might go down to one of these little Miami neighborhoods and hang out with a bunch of people there and think they're cool. And there's a lot of that there, as well. I think the best thing, though, as far as getting out of the hood, would just be to stay on the right path, which is super cliche, but it's the truth. Keep your friends like super close, but also make sure that your friends are of value and that they can actually bring something to your life and not just be around for drinking and BS. And yeah, you of course still have fun, but I would say the main thing is just to focus and try and save money, because of course the hardest thing in the hood or anywhere, even middle class, is just saving money, kind of being on ends meet. So if you could just get out of that hump of being on ends meet and have a little bit more of a foundation of some money, eventually, slowly but surely, you could definitely make your way out of the hood and to a better neighborhood for sure.
One other thing I want to ask you about was the whole voting thing. I'm very curious to hear your opinion on, Miami and Florida was one of the big stories of the 2020 election. A lot of people thought that Florida was going to maybe go blue, and a lot of the Cubans and the Hispanics in Florida did not vote for Joe Biden and supported Donald Trump. And it seems like they're headed in that direction even more. How do you feel about that?
It's so weird. I mean, I remember I voted for Biden because I just felt when all of that was happening back then, was it like, are we going on 2 years now when that was all in effect? I just feel so kind of cheesy. And I guess I was looking from a more liberal, minded perspective. Both my parents, my mom is Cuban, my dad's Dominican. Both of them are, my mom not so much, but still she follows a lot of conservative ideologies, and definitely my dad. He's a let's go Brandon type of person. But regardless, even me, kind of like after the whole fact, I don't know, when I voted, I felt like my vote did and didn't make a difference. Did because, yeah, I mean, it's always been a trend, but yeah, I just remember those past 2 years, I was kind of like, no, I don't know. I was just kind of trying to be the rebel. And I remember my parents would tell me this and that about, Biden, and the Black Lives Matter thing was coming in. I remember that was the whole thing around that time. So I was just like, no, I'm gonna vote for Biden. Let's see what happens. But now looking at it, I'm just kind of like, what's really changed? I know he still has a couple years, but I'm just like, I don't know. And you are correct. The Latino population down here is getting even stronger with the whole Biden, with the Trump, supporting thing. There's a bunch of Trump 2024s flags, in front of Hialeah houses. I'm sure you may have seen one or two.
I did not. I might. I gotta go back and look at the footage. I would love to see that if I caught that on camera.
Yeah, if I send you the right intersections, you'll know the perfect neighborhoods in the nice area of Hialeah. Everything is Trump, 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 Trump. It's just it's crazy. But like on a personal opinion, as far as like my political view, I don't want to say like, oh, I'm a conservative or oh, I'm liberal. I'm not, like, especially after voting that last time, it just made me feel like, dang, what did I vote for? What if I would have voted Trump's way and it would have went his way? What would have been happening right now? So it's like I don't hold too much attachment to like the whole, oh, I'm this, I'm that. But I've definitely learned a lot in the past few years after voting and taking my own opinion, and also hearing other people's thoughts on it. So I definitely can kind of form off of that now for the next couple of votes that I do.
Yeah, you mentioned Black Lives Matter. How come there's not a Cuban Lives Matter movement?
They have their own Cuban liberation movements and stuff, and there's like Cuban TV personalities that have their YouTube channels and go on live streams, and they'll have their 5,000-10,000 people that go on every day religiously and watch them. But it's just, I guess maybe it's because it's only secluded to like Central and South Florida where the big Cuban populations are. I know there's like a semi-big population growing now in Houston, Texas for the Cubans, but at the end of the day, if you're out of Florida, you're not going to hear too much about Cubans. I don't know how many Cubans you ran across outside of Florida. So it's, I would put it on that, really. There was a big like movement last year about, going out and, having our families over there in Cuba go out and march and protest against the government. And we're kind of like in the same boat this time around this year. Like they're still doing it, it's crazy. But I would overall say it's just because it's not such a predominantly large population, such as like Mexicans or even like Puerto Ricans or Dominicans, like up in New York and stuff. Like once you leave Florida, I don't really hear too much about Cubans.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't ever hear about any Hispanic Lives Matter, Mexican Lives Matter. I don't hear about any of that stuff. I'm just wondering why that is. Maybe
they keep it to the language. That's another thing too. Like they're so stuck in their own language. They have their own phrases, their own, but it's Spanish. So it's like they probably do have something there. I know they have something called, I think it's called Patria y Vida, which is like liberty and life or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, that translates.
Yeah, but they don't go out and like,
I mean, yeah, they'll have like, they'll go to Calle Ocho, like little Havana area there, and they'll have like little parades and cars will get together and have the Cuban flags and stuff. But I even looked at that sometimes because I've been to Cuba a bunch of times myself to see my family over there before all of this happened, before COVID, before everything. And I kind of think at times, like, it's kind of hypocritical. Like, you guys are over here with your nice Hialeah houses, that you paid $300,000-400,000 for, and your Mercedes that you probably got on credit or whatever, and you're waving a Cuban flag, like, save my people. So it's fishy. It's up and down, but what can I say? I'm half Cuban. I love my people either way.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I do like Miami. I try to always find as many bad things that I can with the place because that's what you guys want to hear and click on. I didn't really find a lot of things. I like it there. I don't often think I want to come back to a place that I visit, and I would totally go back down to Miami again. If y'all can figure out that part of town that's been traditionally, dangerous and criminal, where criminals are at, and it sounds like that's getting all cleaned up. Like Miami has a really bright future, I have to say.
So if gentrification comes back into it, everything is just nice. I just remember back when I was a kid going around in the streets, those same blocks, those same streets, riding in my dad's car. I'm just like scared out of my mind. But I go now, and it's, of course you have your moments, but it's nothing. It's nothing. Like especially compared to when I was a kid.
Hey everyone, so it's pretty clear by now that elected leaders aren't going to help you. If you don't like what you saw in this video, demanding change won't work. You're going to have to do it on your own. If you want to be safe and want your community to be a place where people want to live, you're going to have to clean the place up yourselves. You're going to have to work with your friends and neighbors to lower crime. Politicians clearly don't care as much anymore. It's up to us. Are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. You can get my email in the description to find out how I can help you find your perfect relocation. And I can also help you find your new house too. Email me and I'll work with you on not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home too. That's right. I know awesome, reliable agents all over the country, and I'd love to connect you to somebody who can help you search for that perfect home.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.